Thank you very much for getting back and brief break. Mr. Smith, we have on our agenda a North Carolina Eastern Alliance Corporation presentation. We have some special guests today from out of town. Would you please introduce
Yes, sir.
them?
We have Mr. John Chafee here today, and he's going to bring us up to date on some fast and furious changes that have occurred in a short time period, and they're doing a great job. The board members have been reporting back, but I think many of you said it would be a good idea that the public hear kind of what's going on, the impact. The region has a significant impact on what we do and our success in economic development, so glad to have this morning John Chafee.
Welcome, Mr. Chafee.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good to be with all of you again. And thank you for the invitation. I'm delighted to be with you this morning. And yes, what I'm going to do is take a little bit of time just to give you kind of an overview of how we got started, what we've done, how we've partnered, especially with Wayne County, over the course of the last 20 years, and then what's facing us and what do we think is the road ahead. Thanks to Marcia for getting me set up, loaded up, and I think you have a couple of handouts with you as well. And some of those we'll talk a little bit about too. But as you know, in terms of it started here about 20 years ago at the desk of the people that were sitting in your shoes at that point in time, 13 counties that came together and decided they wanted to form a regional partnership, petitioned the state, and the state created what was then called the Global Trans-Park Development Commission. About 10 years ago, we decided to change the makeup of the board, reduce it from 42 people down in size, and at that point in time, we went from 42 to 19. 6 of those people appointed by the state, 2 by the House, 2 by the Senate, 2 by the governor. And that's where we find ourselves today. But I wanted to give you, again, a really quick overview in terms of who we are and what we've done, and it's particularly relevant, I think, in this county, and the way we've approached it in terms of our partnership. You know, most of the regions around the state consider themselves to be marketing entities. We've always been a little bit more than that. Marketing and PR, public relations, has always been a core component in terms of what we've done, but we've been about capacity building. Ever since our inception, that was part of the rationale, is getting our communities in better position to compete for new jobs and investment. And so we've done a number of things in that respect, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But you know, about 10 years ago, we launched in terms of a new process, in terms of what we should be doing as a region to be able to support our respective partners and communities. And we went through this extended process in terms of community assessment. A lot of people, over 250 people, came together and decided we needed to pursue about 16 things. Our board decided that was a bit too many to tackle. We narrowed it down to the 6 you see on the screen in terms of what we could do to actually improve capacity and help develop our region. Still, in terms of the marketing arena, just listed a number of activities that we've undertaken over the years, and particularly in terms of the last 5 to 10 years, what we've done and the approach we've taken to it. We've gone about it marketing on a basis of identifying our clusters. Those are economic clusters. Those are networks of companies and organizations that may support those companies, and how they interact with one another to be able to build a regional network, a regional economy. We've undertaken things such as what we call Ignition East, which was an effort really to invite consultants and some actually people from the North Carolina Department into our region to be face-to-face with our local economic developers, have an opportunity for them to meet some of the business people in our community and relate their experience having located in Eastern North Carolina, and their experience, what how they succeeded in business here in terms of going forward. It was a term to great success. Your local economic developer, Joanna Helms, was an active participant in that, and a strong advocate for us. The end result in terms of, the other thing related to that is, it wasn't really marketing, but it was called Envision East. Y'all were a participant in that. It was something tied to our Military Growth Task Force that we launched several years ago. And under the leadership of Mark, he approached and invited Wayne County in several years ago, and it was a great addition to that. We accomplished many things, and I'll talk a little bit about that later too. The last slide I put up, we generated about 52 prospects, leads, last fiscal year as a result of our efforts. About 20 of those actually visited the region. Not all of them came to Wayne County, as you know. We try to respond to a set of criteria that a company establishes, and we try to match those up. Any chance we get, if they're rather loose on their criteria, we give all of our counties an opportunity to petition or submit proposals. But it doesn't always work that way sometimes, and they pick and choose where they want to go and visit. But we did have 20 visits. This is just a slide that gives you an idea in terms of the source of those clients, in terms of how they came to our doorstep. You can see in terms of only about 3% of them came as a result of consultants to the region. Hence, you're maybe a clearer view of why we held Ignition East, to be able to get consultants more familiar with what makes us an attractive place to do business. The other thing in terms of looking at those projects by clusters, pretty even distribution for the most part, except marine trades, which is an industry group heavily impacted by the recession. The boating industry just tanked, and it's now beginning to come back, but not a lot of client activity there, but still an important cluster for us, especially along the coast. But it does infiltrate inward from the coast. You know, there's some boat manufacturers that are located in interior counties as well. But how do we go about in terms of looking at that? I mentioned clusters. I've identified for you here the clusters that we targeted. A number of these relate to Wayne County. I think my sleeve hit that little roller, didn't it? So advanced manufacturing, we break that down in terms of what it identifies more specifically with the automotive industry, industrial machinery, the aerospace and defense sector in particular, but we also pay attention to life sciences, value-added ag, and I'll define value-added ag. It could be anything from food processing to wood products, particularly in terms of lumber and wood products, paper mills, paper activity, or advanced companies that come from that. Or the latest is in terms of a new biorefinery that essentially we're growing crops, or they will grow crops and actually feed into that biorefinery as an advanced biofuels production facility. So that's the wide range of what it constitutes value-added ag. Some examples in terms of clients that came to our doorstep as a result of our activities. We were the first point of contact. Sanderson Farms, you pretty well know who they are, located in Kinston, Lenore County. Garrelect is a company that came to us out of our participation in the air show. Unfortunately, they did not end up locating in our region, but they at least looked in our region. They ended up in Wilmington. Medicago is an ag life science company out of Canada. They came and looked in our area, actually identified a particular location they wanted to locate in our region, but unfortunately couldn't put the real estate deal together, and they ended up going with what they thought was a safe track, ended up in the Triangle. Chemtex, a project that came through, looked at Wayne County, narrowed its sites to one in Duplin County and one in Sampson County, chose ultimately the one in Sampson, but it'll still have a huge impact on our region. That's the one in terms of it's a biorefinery. They'll grow 40,000 acres of crops to be able to feed that facility. Non-food crops, I should point out. It's woody biomass. They use enzymes produced by Novozyme that's located just outside Raleigh in Franklinton. And they've basically gone about perfecting this product so they can make sugars at a competitive price. But they'll feed into the biofuels industry, hopefully specifically in our case, aviation fuel. Because as you know, see in those jets, they burn an awful lot of jet fuel. And if we can keep farmers working on the land, it's important for us in terms of protecting those flight paths. That's why value-added ag is such an important component of what we do. I'll point out that it's also the interrelationship between those clusters that gives us a unique selling proposition as well. If we look at the aerospace industry, our defense industry, and value-added ag, they all are kind of intertwined as being important sectors and gives us a rather unique position in terms of marketing our particular region with respect to those clusters. And this is the basis for part of the reason why we chose the clusters that we did. This is essentially a cluster map. It's a freeze frame photograph, if you will, of what our cluster is. I'll explain it to you. That red line that goes all the way across right in the middle of the graph, that's the average salary that's paid in our region. It's gone up by about $4,000 in the last 6 years. It's right now at about $42,000 a year. That's the overall average wage or salary paid in North Carolina's eastern region. Anything above the line is above average wages paid. So you look in terms of those clusters, you see which ones are up there. The military, aerospace and defense sector, non-woven goods, pharmaceuticals and biopharmaceuticals that are there. All important sectors for us, all growing in this region over the course of the last 6 years. The other element of that gives you a picture of it is the size of that globe represents the absolute number of people employed. So the bigger the ball, the more people employed in that one sector. The further to the, how are you looking at this? Further to the right that you go, same way I'm, further to the right you go, is the concentration of that industry sector in our region. So you see tobacco products, it's a very small circle, but very heavily concentrated in eastern North Carolina. The military, a large ball to the right in terms of the graph, anything basically over one is parity on the national average. So if you exceed 1, it means that industry cluster, or that sector, is more heavily concentrated in our region than you'd find as the national average. So tobacco products, military, aerospace and defense, pharmaceuticals, meat processing, non-woven goods, household appliances, all significant players in terms of this region. And that's basically part of the rationale that we took in terms of deciding which ones were important, where do we have opportunity. We also looked at it in terms of whether they were threatened or whether they were growing sectors overall, and particularly as it related to our region. So the other element was our subregion. So we recognize that all of our 13 counties are not the same. What characterizes them, they're not alone. They actually act as a subregion within our region. So you can look in terms of what drives the local economy as you look at those coastal counties, certainly the military, marine trades, tourism, et cetera. If you look back over in Wayne County, part of that central subregion, it's definitely, again, the military, value-added ag, building products, and a number of others in terms of those opportunities. So we also factor that in to say, are we picking clusters that are relevant to the various subregions, and therefore all of our counties have an opportunity to participate and benefit from our marketing activities. Part of that process is going about mapping those clusters so people get an idea. What a cluster is, it's in terms of up the supply chain as well as down the supply chain. So you think about the aerospace industry, and then you have a cadre of companies that supply that. We don't have an end user in this region per se. We have one close by in Boeing to the south in South Carolina. This is the East Coast. The Southeast Coast is really becoming the concentration for the aerospace industry on the new concentration of the industry, running from North Carolina down to Alabama. The two big players so far are Airbus and Boeing. Airbus in Alabama, Boeing in terms of near Charleston, South Carolina. But we have Spirit AeroSystems that's entered into our region, and they are a huge player in the industry. They're the single largest supplier, tier 1 supplier to the aerospace industry in the world. They were spun out of Boeing earlier in terms of this century, but they came out when they were spun out being one of the largest players. They supply both Boeing and Airbus. And so we have an expectation now that they're ramping up, that flight has taken place in terms of that new Airbus extra wide body, that we'll be seeing their employment ramp up as their production ramps up, and supply chain opportunities that will present themselves for our region. Why we chase that industry. But this is the automotive industry. You can see that Wayne County is a pretty significant player in the automotive sector. In it, you have a number of companies that are core or in the tier 1, tier 2 suppliers to the automotive industry, and then a number of other smaller suppliers that actually even feed those companies in the region. They're the aerospace assets. You can see basically, if we defined it, the Highway 70 corridor from Wayne County down to Craven County are the really big players in that. But even in that industry, there's manufacturers as well as other types of service providers that dot the landscape around the region. Again, in that supply chain, people look at it and say, we don't have a life science company in our community. But in the example, I'll give you one in Craven County. There's actually a machinery manufacturer that makes industrial machinery, and one of their customers happens to be the pharmaceutical industry. They make it for the food processing industry, they make machines for the pharmaceutical industry and a number of different applications. So that supply chain can extend pretty significantly beyond the bounds of just that immediate core employer. Logistics, we're in the process of mapping the value-added ag. We haven't finished that. It's a really complex one because it's huge. There are about 120 companies in our region that we believe are in the supply chain or are in the value-added ag sphere. And there are about 20,000 people if you collectively put all those together. Second largest employer in the region. So a very significant possibility to us. I mentioned in terms of we started out as a capacity builder or supporting our communities in capacity building. We did that through hard infrastructure for the first 15 years. And that was, again, water, sewer, natural gas lines, industrial park development, certification of industrial parks, providing funding for shell buildings and so forth. What we did about 5 years ago, it said, we've done a lot in that arena. We've done 15 years worth. Now we need to pay attention to another critical element that factors into industrial location and the health of a community and being able to sustain growth, and that's the workforce. And so we turned our attention. We actually picked up on something that was being done at the time in Wayne County called Wayne Works. I congratulate you guys and your whole community for what you've done there in setting the tone and really setting the bar. I'll show you a slide a little bit later that shows in terms of what you've helped drive in this region. But we decided we focus our attention in terms of the workforce. We turned in terms of what we moved. Again, Wayne was a leader in this. Your community college became the point of contact for us. Built a group called Aspire, which stood for Assessing Skills for Performance in a Rebounding Economy. That's what Aspire meant to them. And I think they were right on point. What we did is we put money into that, and we basically dictated some of the terms to say it's got to be regional, you have to cooperate with one another, and we're going to do collective marketing. And that's our path forward. We put over $1 million into this project over the course of the last 5 years, and the results are pretty self-evident. Before we injected money and started our approach and worked on it, we were getting about 1,000 people a year to achieve a career readiness certificate. That's ramped up, as you can see, that now we're getting about over 10,000 people a year obtaining a career readiness certificate. We lead all of the regions in the state in terms of the number, absolute number, and the percentage of our workforce that possesses a CRC. It's what people refer to today as a stackable credential. That's the beginning point for us, is if somebody possesses a CRC, they can take that anywhere in the U.S. It's recognizable. They can walk into a company and say, I have a CRC. They've developed a work profile. It's a plug-and-play kind of deal. They know exactly what they're getting in terms of the kind of caliber of individual they're talking about, because it's rated. Of course, you know Wayne County is one of the first 4 counties in the state that became an NC work-ready community. That was something was funded by the Rural Center. They looked to us because of what we are already doing in terms of workforce development and said, would you partner with us? And we said, absolutely. So we devised in terms of the model, in terms of this. We ran through it. We got 4. We probably is now in terms of if they want to roll it out on the basis of a statewide model, we'll probably tweak it a little bit because we think in some cases we set the bar maybe a little bit lower than we need to be. We set the graduation rate for high school graduation at 80%. This was at a time in terms of a lot of graduation rates were hovering in the 60s. We made tremendous progress. Public schools did a wonderful job in partnering with a number of others, including the community college system, to ramp that up. So we think actually now to make it more competitive, we need to go beyond that 1% annual increase in terms of ramping up. That would be our recommendation, I think, going forward to the state. But this speaks to the issue. You've got a company in AAR that brought attention to this issue at one point in time, and that is the need to really ramp up STEM education and really a STEM qualified workforce. These are just some things taken out of this one Wall Street Journal article that attests to the value and the importance of it. One thing that really surprised me in this is that 30% of the kids or the people that take the Armed Forces entrance exam fail first time around. The military has become a very technically oriented organization. They need highly qualified people as well. And so it's imperative not only for them, but for us in terms of the region and for our companies that we respond and provide that qualified workforce. And so we embarked on this thing called STEM East. It really originated in Lenoir County in this case because of Spirit AeroSystem arriving and the concern about, now this dog has bitten this tire, what are we going to do with it? And the response was to come up with a STEM initiative. We decided that the focal point really needed to be in middle schools because that's where we were losing a lot of kids, is they either turned off or they turned on to education in middle school because they were getting old enough to question what's the relevancy of what I'm learning. And so part of what STEM East does is it makes middle school math and science relevant because it draws industry into the picture to get involved in middle school education, support those teachers, give examples for those students about the career opportunities that exist for them in their own backyard if they'll simply pursue an educational pathway that's more rigorous and is more focused in terms of STEM. In this, there's a double meaning to STEM, certainly science, technology, engineering, and math, but the other one I really love is strategies that engage minds. And that's really part of the double value of it, is it's not simply cramming something down a kid's throat, it's making them realize that they need to really they need to be critical in terms of their thinking. And of course, Wayne County was one of the leaders in this, came on early, and is one of the 4 counties where we deployed 5 STEM centers. Great results, and your team here did a wonderful job being able to go out and get additional grant funding and leverage that, and now putting a STEM center in every single middle school. Now we're simply building out the network. Our vision is we want every middle school in our region to have a STEM center. We know we have to bite it off one at a time. We know we've got commitments now to put at least 30 some odd STEM centers in middle schools across our region, 5 counties, and we're now taking it to additional counties throughout the region. That's all a matter of meeting the needs of not only our existing industry, but what Joanna and her team might go out and recruit in the way of new companies. It's a great message. It's resonated extremely well with employers throughout the region, and I'll mention that a little bit when we come back. Just some other items to give you an idea in terms of some other things that we've done that are relevant. Entrepreneurship, what we call IMAP East, Inception Micro Angel Fund, is to help launch new young startup companies that may come about and look in terms of starting in our region or beyond. But overall, in terms of a synopsis summary, we've put out over $6.5 million in grants over our 20-year history. That day is over for the most part in terms of where we are, and $27 million plus in low-interest loans to our counties. So if you look in terms of just Wayne County, because it always comes back, what's in it for me and what have you done for us? And that is, final stat, you invested in terms of us, our regional entity, for to undertake these activities. $331,000 was that initial stake that you put up that came from that $5 license tag fee. You've gotten back from us in the way of grants almost $600,000, or nearly 150% return on your investment. And that's kind of taken me to where we are today, because now we're talking about other investors, our counties being among those investors going forward. But because of what's taken place, the legislature is a decision in terms, and the administration, is privatizing economic development in the state of North Carolina. That's beginning at the state level with the Commerce Department, as you know. They are now looking in terms of splitting the functions of the Commerce Department. The public side will maintain in terms of the grant-making activities. Workforce Solutions will remain on the public side because they receive federal dollars. The private side will become really the marketing arm of the state of North Carolina, what they call P3, the public-private partnership. So that'll be business and industry, what we know as business and industry development, international trade, international marketing, the film, sports section or division will move over to that to be on the private side. Basically, anything to do with marketing and some of the research to be able to support and feed marketing will go to the private sector. The other element that came with that was a dissolution of the public regional partnerships, and we got lumped in with those public entities. As you know, in terms of the history, we formed in 1993. The legislature passed the enabling legislation, the tax was enacted, and we were created. That put a bit of a flurry on, because when we did that, everybody around us looked and said, oh, hey, we want a regional marketing organization too. And so the legislature created the Northeast Partnership, the Southeast Partnership, and what's become known as Advantage West. They funded those organizations, and they went to the urban centers at the same time and said, you're focused on your core counties. Say the triangle was Raleigh, was Wake County, Durham County, Orange County. And the state went to them and said, we want to assign all of the 100 counties in the state to a regional partnership, and these are the ones that we want you to take. We'll give you money to represent and assist those counties. And that's how we came to be in terms of 7 regional economic development partnerships across the state. Well, the actions taken is by the legislature is say, if you can survive on your own without state funding, it's fine. But at the same time, we're going to dissolve those rural organizations. The other 3 that I mentioned, in most part, the state appoints largely all of those members of the board. Ours is a different. We still have 13 represented by each one of our counties, 13 board members, and then the other 6 that I mentioned to you earlier. So we're moving forward in terms of now this transition. Unfortunately, instead of having about a month or a half a month to do this, we now, because of the advocacy on the part of the administration, the Secretary of Commerce and the Governor's advisor, instead of being dissolved on July 1, 2013, we now are facing dissolution in June 30th, 2014. Gives us a year to make this transition, and that's what we're in the process of doing today. So we created this thing called NC East Alliance as a 501c4 a little over a decade ago. It remained dormant except to run things like we mentioned to you about Ignition East. Now we're in the process of ramping down the public entity known as North Carolina's Eastern Region, and we're ramping up North Carolina East Alliance as a private not-for-profit entity. Means we're going for funding, yes, still from the public sector in terms of our individual counties, but as well as in terms of turning to the private sector and say, this is what we've done, this is what we propose to do, would you invest in us in terms of being able to go forward to continue our core mission. We retained a group, the granddaddy of all groups in this, called National Community Development Services, and their specific work is to advise private not-for-profit or economic development organizations in terms of what's the path forward in raising private dollars to support economic development. They've done it well. They've done it also in North Carolina. And we retained them. They came back. They did a feasibility study. They went out and interviewed about 55 people throughout the region. We didn't get to all the people we wanted to simply because of, in some cases, people's schedules, and in some cases because we just forgot some people. But the task was to get out and get as many different people around the region as possible, both private sector and public sector. They interviewed 55 over the course of about a month and a half. And the results came back from that and said, you're in much better shape than you were a decade ago when we did this same thing. Because 10 years ago, they came back to the organization after they created the 501c4 and said, you're not ready for prime time because you're not well known. And in some cases, those people that do know you well don't like what you've done or don't like what you're doing. So we have a very different result this time. And that is they came back and they said, we're respected by who knows us and what we do, what we've delivered, but we're still a relatively unknown entity. Part of that rationale is because we were often the silent partner. We worked with other communities, we developed leads, we a lot of times turned over those leads to the North Carolina Department of Commerce because that was our understanding of the model at the time. But we also provided funding for you to help you close deals because we all understand is a deal on a project is made at the local level in concert with the state. We're just a bit of the middleman trying to make connections and enable the communities to be in a better position to perform. So we still have a little bit of work to do to be able to get out and make people aware, and that's why I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. But what also came back from that is to say, you know, I talked about those 6 things that were identified early on, what we should do. And they came back and said, you really need to narrow your focus a little bit. If you want people to invest in you, you've got to target your activities and really focus your efforts to be successful. These are the three that came back. Workforce development, still critical, important, especially to our manufacturing community. Number two, marketing and lead generation, critically important to our local economic development organizations. And advocacy. With a shift of population westward into the very large urban centers, there's a feeling in terms of Eastern North Carolina is there's a possibility we may be left out. We need to be collective, we need to be organized, and we need to be regional in terms of our approach to make sure that we convey the message to our leadership, not only in Raleigh, but in Washington, D.C. And that's particularly critical with our military communities in terms of being able to do things to protect our military installations and advocate for those military installations. And as you know, in terms of if you're dependent upon air power, it's what goes on outside the boundaries of your county that are as relevant as what goes on inside the boundaries. And again, it's going back to protecting those flight passes, one of the big ones. That's something that we can do on a regional scale and convince the leadership in Raleigh how important it is and why they need to invest in it as well. So the next step for us, in entrepreneurship came in slightly behind in terms of there's still a feeling we need to look in terms of how do we catalyze growth internally and support people that have great ideas. How do we make connections for them to connect them with resources? So we can still pay a little bit of attention to that and working with our partners in that respect. But the next steps going forward is in terms of convening regional leaders to have really a conversation about how we go forward. And part of that is that we agree on these are the principal targets that we want to pursue. These are the activities we want to take. And then what are actually the specific goals and objectives that we establish within each one of these. And then finally, how do we measure it? What metrics do we establish that we can go back and report back to our investors as to these are the goals we set collectively, this is how we met up, this is how we measured up in terms of our path forward in terms of what we did. Initially, we were going on the basis we were assuming in terms of our original 13-county footprint. We've got to start somewhere. That's the basis in terms of where we are. But it's a matter in terms of coming to the commissioners and hopefully in terms of the conversation with your local economic development organization, having those conversations is what is it we want to do? Our hope is that you'll choose to stay with us based on what we've done and based on what we're carving out as in terms of where we want to go in the future. And that we'll go out on that basis and pursue funding from private sector organizations. We don't want to rob Peter to pay Paul, which means we don't want to basically undermine the local economic development efforts to support and obtain private dollars. We basically want to complement that and show how we can basically add value to the process and how we do that by bringing additional funds to be able to support that mission to the table. We start out with about $3 million because our board, thank you John and Ray and some of your predecessors, they were mindful in terms of this kind of day might come. Actually, they were looking, if you look in terms of this report, you'll see actually what was taking place in our region over the course of the last several years, last 8 years in particular, declining revenues and trying to accomplish the same results with declining revenues. Declining revenues from the state in terms of their appropriation, declining revenues in terms of the interest that we were earning off of our loans and off of our trust fund monies. And so we held a reserve fund. The board set a goal that says we don't want to spend more than 10% of our reserve fund on our annual budget. So we've done that. But we had built up a reserve fund over the years, and we've tried to maintain that as best we can. That's the bridge to the future for us today. Since we basically, when we're dissolved, our basically business model is completely eliminated because about 90% of where we were, or about 80 to 90% of where we were obtaining funds is no longer going to be there. We have succeeded, as you note from that graph too, in terms of obtaining grant funds to support a number of our key missions. Our Military Growth Task Force, largely supported by grant funds from the Department of Defense. A good amount in terms of our workforce development supported by grant funds. And our path forward, we're going to continue on that basis in terms of grant funds to support our side of the activity, but also working with our individual communities and counties to assist them in being able to prepare and develop grant applications to continue to support those efforts. Going forward in the interim, these are kind of the activities we'll continue to undertake. They're probably still part of that core mission that people believe that we should be doing to be able to support the growth of our region. So still marketing, still workforce development, Still PR, and in PR, it's a matter of looking for where there are good stories that come out of our communities that we can then take and put it maybe on a national scene and get attention to that. We did that with Wayne Works and the Workforce Development Initiative. When you won a national award, we took that, couched that, and framed that in terms of a regional position, still highlighting the work that had been done by Goldsboro and Wayne County. And we put that out. That message was picked out in media markets across the country. So you got enormous amount of exposure as a result of that. That's the type of story that we're looking for that gives us something unique, but it may also be something that attests to what's being done locally or regionally and how that might relate to somewhere else in the world as to what may be done there or what they may need to do. So that's about where we are to date. I mentioned to you that that $3 million fund that we have, that was the reserve fund that we had built up over the years. It's termed as regional money by our auditor, and our attorney says, yes, that indeed is regional money. The rationale by why it was moved is when things were running fast and furious toward the end of the legislative session, there was one bill introduced that would have stripped that money from the region. The view of the staff and our board and our attorney was that's regional money and that belongs in the region and does not need to go back to the state. So we transferred that money over to our private not-for-profit. And in doing that, the debate arose about, well, what if a county chooses to leave the region and what happens to their share of that money? So the motion was made and it was approved that if a county elected to leave the region, they could petition the private sector board for their proportionate share of that money once all of the obligations had been paid out that were incurred by the Eastern region or by the Eastern Alliance. And so that's where we stand today as we go forward in terms of meeting with either local economic development commissions or the Board of Commissioners to say, this is where we were, this is how we've come to arrive at this point. This is what we think is our path forward and what we intend to do and how we intend to go about doing it. And hopefully you're on board and you're going to go forward with us. I'll stop there, Mr. Chairman, and be more than happy to respond to any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Shea. Thank you, Mr. Shea. Thank you so much. Good presentation. Any questions from the commission?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Mayo.
Thank you for that presentation. The Eastern region is going to cease to exist, Eastern region, June 31st?
June 30th,
June
2014, correct.
Okay. My understanding is that there is still, Eastern region still has money to loan.
Yes, sir.
To the counties in our region.
Yes.
Can you share with us how much that would be? How much?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you for that question. You're absolutely correct. There's your trust fund essentially is a revolving loan fund, and there are two components of it. One is the license plate tag revenue that was put in by everybody that renewed their license tag for that 5-year period of time. That was the county contribution to it. There's also a portion of that that's the state allocation, which was given to the region as a grant, one-time grant by the state, to make up the difference between what would have been generated by a 1-cent sales tax versus what is expected to be generated by the $5 license tag fee that was collected for 5 years. That was $7.5 million. That was distributed, great sense of regionalism, on the basis of equal shares for every county. So that $7.5 million represents $577,000 roughly. And so Wayne County has two pieces of money that's available. That money available from the state's available also up until June 30th. I think Wayne County has somewhere, and I may be off by $100,000 or more, but because I know you've borrowed money against your trust fund, but I think you have somewhere around $1 million or so that you could borrow. I can get back to you with a very specific figure on that. But the timeline to be able to do that, because you must close on that loan before June 30th, which means you have to back up the timetable and be able to initiate that process by late February, maybe early March at the very latest. But those monies are available to loan. Right now, the loan rate is 2%. There is a proposal that's going to go before the board that's going to modify that a little bit, that actually may make terms a bit more favorable to the counties, because our view is put that money to work, and put all of that money to work before a portion of it goes away. What will happen to that money, Mr. Mayo, is that if you borrow that money, then it becomes, on June 30th, due and payable to the state treasurer's office. You make the principal and interest payment. The principal will come back. The principal that's attributable to your portionate share of the $5 license fee will be returned to Wayne County. So that'll be essentially your cashing out of your trust fund monies. The portion of that, and it's a portion of it that you have to actually pay the state money first, so that goes into the state. But then you'll get back your basically your trust fund money, that's your $5 license tag monies.
So the money that's not dispersed will go back to the state. Will go back
Correct.
to the state, and it'll be put in from the other 7 regions, it'll be put in a central pot.
That's
They-
good question.
I'll-
We're the only one.
Huh?
No other region in the state has a trust fund like we do.
Okay, all right, good. Okay.
So it was created as an advantageous position for us, generated envy on the part of a lot of our other regional partners, because it was a very unique and different way to fund a regional economic development organization. And that corpus remained intact, so that trust fund has been there for the last 20 years. So you borrow that money, and eventually that principal that you had will come back to Wayne County.
Mr. Chairman, I have one more question.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayo.
I'm asking these because I have been asked by several members of the board these same questions. And so I understand through our meetings and so forth, which Commissioner Bell and I are on the board of Eastern Region, that you've been working with Secretary Decker, met with her
Yes, sir.
a bunch of times, and you're trying to find a fit where you can fit in. And I wanted to ask you, how is that process going? What kind of
Great.
vibes are you getting from the state level?
Thank you, sir. A very important question. So there are 2 elements associated with that. One is what's called the prosperity zones that's been put forward. That legislation actually didn't pass, but the way it was set up within the budget is that the Commerce Department is moving forward along with DOT, DENR, Department of Environment and Natural Resources, and maybe one other Department of State. The way the Commerce Secretary describes that is the prosperity zones are government service delivery districts, and that's what they are. So this notion in terms of a one-stop shop, that if a business wants to investigate what is it I need to do to be able to start a business or open a business in North Carolina, they know they can go to that one-stop shop and be able to meet with one of everybody representing those different organizations and get information about what permits they need or what else they might need to do to be able to go into business in the state of North Carolina. It's a very important component. I think it's a great idea. But the other component of that is that she iterates is that those are not regional marketing organizations. Those are government service delivery districts. So the view is those regional marketing entities or those regional partnerships left standing at the end of the day, supported by public funds and private funds, local public-private partnerships, that's what they're working out in terms of how do you integrate those regional economic development agencies in together with this new marketing arm of the Department of Commerce, because they'll all be private entities at the end of the day come July 1. And so she's asked me to serve on a particular task force. The current situation is that the governor has charged an interim economic development board, about a dozen people, say, to come up with an economic development strategy for the state of North Carolina and a plan moving forward in terms of how do you integrate all these different activities. I'm invited to serve on a committee that's basically dealing with how do we fuse the state economic development partnership with these new regional economic development partnerships, and then how do they interact with these new prosperity zones in terms of that staff that'll be destined to occupy a point in place in each region, in each prosperity zone. And that group is looking in terms of, one is how do we get people to behave nicely, because that's always a constant issue, is how do you get people to work collaboratively? And I really commend you guys in Wayne County for how well you've done in that regard. I wish all of our counties were as well advanced as you are in that regard. So how do you basically incentivize state people to work together with regional people, to work together with local people in a really seamless, really organized team effort to put a good face in front of the client and the prospect? That's a very important task for us. We've tried it in the past. It worked well in some cases and not necessarily in others. And the other element of it is developing those goals and objectives and what should be the metrics by which they measure the state entity, because there'll be private investors at the state level now. And those private investors are going to want to know, if I'm putting my money in, what am I getting back out of it? I want to see in terms of what you're setting as a goal. I want to have some input in terms of that, what that is. And then I want to see metrics. How are you measuring it? And so we'll be looking in terms of how then we integrate that on a regional level, and how does that whole thing work together. So we've had a number of conversations. We'll be meeting again. We've got a statewide group called the North Carolina Partnership for Economic Development. Consists of currently today the heads of all the regional partnerships, the chairman and the presidents of those groups, and the Secretary of Commerce. So we meet on a quarterly basis. Our next quarterly meeting is scheduled for January. And that's an opportunity for us basically to have conversations about how we doing moving forward in terms of coordinating and collaborating for economic development in North Carolina.
Any other comments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bell?
Do we still have in place, you remember when we had in place where if one county was not going to use their money, another county could borrow that money?
Yes, sir, that's still in place.
Okay.
There's only one county that's taken advantage of that so far, and that was Edgecombe. But it is still in place, it's still available, and that's a matter of having a conversation between counties. So if some county has a big infrastructure project and they want to borrow additional funds, there is that opportunity to be able to have that conversation and talk about, can you roll over and borrow from another county's pot?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Daugherty?
for what purposes would we be able to borrow on that $1 million approximately?
Great question. Look at the back of the sheet. It gives you use of funds. And the way I've split that out is two ways. One is to say, these are known activities in terms of how every single one of our county may have used these funds in the past. A business incubator, a shell building, developing an industrial park, running water and sewer lines, the standard stuff in terms of hard infrastructure. In some cases, particularly for our rural counties, we actually help them in terms of developing their marketing materials. And then I've listed down some of the other activities where we've had conversations at the board level to say, would we consider and deem these to be economic development related purposes? And one of those I'll point out to you is community college facilities and equipment. If your community college is looking in terms of trying to respond to the needs of, say, the automotive sector in Wayne County, and we want to develop a new facility, and we need certain types of equipment to be able to respond to do that. And some of the way we're thinking is that is a relationship to economic development that is an infrastructure that may be needed to advance job and investments in Wayne County. I would advocate for that. It's up to the board to ultimately decide that, yes, we agree that that's a economic development purpose. And I think our attorney would weigh in on that. But I think that's kind of an example of, hasn't been done yet, but it's possible.
A follow-up on that, and that is, if I'm understanding what you're stating, is that approximately $1 million is available for Wayne County.
Yes, sir.
And if we borrowed those funds for an approved project, when we repay those funds, actually we're not repaying the entire $1 million because we get credit back
Yes, sir.
for that portion that would be there left over from the license plate.
That's exactly
Is that
right.
correct?
That's correct.
So actually, it's a win-win all the way around for Wayne County, and I would
Yes, sir.
hope that we would take advantage of that in some way before February.
I would love you to, because I was a local economic development developer for a lot of years, and to be able to have access to that money, I'd like to see every single one of our counties especially borrow that state money before it goes back and
Yeah, if
it's
not,
not
it's gonna
available
go
to
back
you
to the
again.
state.
Correct.
So if we need some additional money, we need to find some counties that are not going to use their funds and
Yes, sir.
maybe take advantage of that too.
And I wouldn't be surprised, there may be some of those counties where that might be the case.
Can I ask?
Mr. Smith?
On the funds, John, that are available, obviously, we've got the 1 or 1.4 million, give or take, I guess,
Yes, sir.
available. Hands already shooting, they're calculating. And we've already got 3 projects, by the way, so I'm ready for you. But if the money is available from these other counties, if they're not going to be able to use it, can we go after those dollars at the same time? Can I go
Yes,
after
sir.
those dollars first and then our money?
No, it has to be your money first.
Okay.
Sorry about that,
Well, I was
Lee.
just trying to lock it down. I was going to get you a letter of intent. this afternoon.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's your money first, and then you can go after
Okay, well, you'll
the
get
others.
2 letters. Okay.
And we'd be more than happy to pair you up, because we can run that polling, but
Okay.
certainly, excuse me, Ray and John can have that conversation
Okay.
with other board members and gain a sense as do they have projects lined up and do they intend to use their share in terms of the trust fund monies
Okay.
and not. And so there may be opportunities for you there.
Mr. Parker?
May I get you to clarify your money?
Yes, sir.
Are you talking about Wayne County's money of the 570, the 13 counties, the 700?
It's your money.
You
is-
have to, in other words, be specific, you have to borrow the money that is Wayne County's because of the license tag before you go into the state trust fund.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, not in that respect. To be able to go after another county's trust fund, you have to borrow everything out of your portion of your trust fund first.
But not these other dollars.
Correct. Well, so when you borrow, the way it's structured, the way our governance is structured, is you borrow a portion of state funds and county funds every time you borrow.
Oh.
And so to be able to take advantage and borrow all the state money you can get, you basically have to borrow everything out of your trust fund.
So we'd get the 1.4, and let's say we're not, and available to us, divided up, we're 200,000, I'd get 1.6.
Yes, sir. Then you can petition us and therefore another county to say,
Or something
if
that
you're
might
not
be
going to
out there.
borrow, we'd like to borrow $200,000 of your trust fund money.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments from the commissioners? Mr. Pate?
If you go after, say, we went over and borrowed $200,000 from another county, at the end of June 30, are we going to pay the treasury back, or are we going to start paying that back to that county? Who gets paid back?
I think that, in my understanding, I'll get clarity for this and share it back with you, Lee and others, that everything come July 1, you will begin making direct payments to the treasurer's office. And then they'll break it out based on the loan documents that we've transferred to them as to how that money is then either kept by the state or repaid to the individual counties.
Thank you, Mr. Chafee. I've got a question on we've gone over workforce development, and the value-added agricultural comments were spot on, I think, for our Ag Center, and I saw Mr. Pate writing down a lot of notes to maybe make those connections in agriculture. But I want to go back, and I know we're running really tight on time now, but if you could, give us about a 3-minute overview of the STEM education network, because our county got so involved in this about 3 years ago that we don't want to see it die, we want to see it grow. And how can we enhance that in Wayne County? You talked about the growth outside of the counties, but and I'll get to the question again. We had a assistant superintendent to mention this past week that it cost $1 million to sustain K-12 curriculum. So if we're taking this, is it a curriculum then, the STEM program?
STEM
as
actually
it
fits into the curriculum.
Okay, so how can we fund more on our STEM program, because it is such an important part of education here in Wayne County, in particular the middle school. So we've got it. Now, how do we grow it, and how can we use some funding to do that?
Thank you. It's a wonderful question. So as we go in terms of looking at how do we stack other activities on top of what we're doing with the STEM centers, and one way that we're already doing that, and Wayne teachers have taken advantage of it, is a component of our STEM East initiative is really helping teachers to be able to make connections again to the private sector. And one of those is actually through a thing called the Keenan Fellows, which is run by NC State University. And that's a matter of taking a teacher out of a classroom and giving them an opportunity to do an externship within a company or in an employer. It could be the hospital, it could be AAR or Mount Olive Pickles for that matter. But it gives them a summer experience in that company. And then they identify collectively between the teacher and the company a project to work on. And they work on that project with a mentor from that company for a year. And then they report back. Well, the end result is, what we hope for essentially is a new, it's not curriculum, but it's a component curriculum. It's a lesson plan, I guess, if you would, that they not only take back into their own school, what they do is they share that in the network, so that every science teacher or every math teacher in the network gets access to the value of that experience of that teacher had in that summer experience plus the year. Costs $20,000 a year.
Yes.
We get $10,000 from a private employer and $10,000 from the Keenan Fellows group from NC State. That's one way to build onto it that really doesn't cost the school system anything. It's what we look at going forward is if we approach things on a regional basis, it's not just Wayne standing alone, but it may be a teacher in another county that comes up with an idea, and it's fed into that network, and then as the network, we may be able to go out and write a grant that says, collectively, we've determined that this would be a really nice add-in or add-on to our STEM East initiative to be able to add value for the teacher, for the student, and really, ultimately, for the employer to be able to do that.
If we wanted to enhance that locally, do we go through you, through the STEM? Is it
You can
is
come.
it STEM from your part, or do we go to the Board of Education? If we want to see this STEM really grow hard,
Yes, sir.
do-
can go
how
to
can we
any one
get
of those.
data, I guess, on the cost
Mhm.
and how much is needed to expand
Yes, sir.
on this?
I think
Or
you
is-
can come to, hopefully, the way it's going to work is you can go to any point of the network, and it's going to be crossed over and connected. So you have multiple minds trying to think of ways in which we can accomplish something new and different
Okay.
that may be an add-on. And so that's the value of being able to build that network. We'd welcome, always open for great ideas. And they come from all different corners of our world. And so we welcome any thoughts about how we might add to it. Steve, one of the things in terms of Steve Hill is doing that. He's the executive director of our STEM East program, and he's already doing add-ons in the sense of what we talked about. One is doing a STEM teacher recognition deal. The other is he came up with this Laser Institute that was actually funded by the Burroughs Wellcome Fund. So external funds to come in and benefit. Wayne County took advantage of that, sent a team to be involved in that. And I hate to tell you, I don't run that day-to-day. I can't even explain to you what the laser program specifically is or was. All I knew is Steve came back and he was really excited. He got funding for it, and he got virtually every county administration, school administration to participate in the program, and they thought it was a really neat thing. That's, again, adding something back to the classroom again. So we're constantly on the prowl, if you will, to look for new ideas and what we can add in to be able to support teachers and support public schools in particular in terms of being able to meet the needs of area employers.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Mayor?
I know we're short on time.
Yes,
but
sir.
I forgot something that's near and dear to Wayne County that I want to ask you about. John, is, as you know, our whole region, eastern region, and even the new regions that we're going to nonprofit is very heavily military.
Yes, sir.
And the Eastern Region Board was concerned early on about would we have representation from the state level all the way as to someone that had experience with logistics, our military. And Eastern Region's always had that. We were concerned about whether we could continue that or not. With your negotiations that's going on, or your talking that's going on, how the new Alliance Board is going to fit, how do you feel about that item we're concerned about our military as far as representation?
Overall, generally, in terms of our military, I feel very good about it. In terms of the DLI, Defense Logistics Initiative, a little bit concerned because, we have thin funds. We don't necessarily see a lot of movement. We know in terms of the Department of Transportation is trying to move forward on that activity. We keep hearing in terms of that there's going to be somebody hired within this new public-private partnership, or in commerce, or maybe both, that is going to be dedicated toward military and defense-related activities. I'm really encouraged by that. We may not have the, going forward, the talent within our own organization like we've had, which I think has been an enormous benefit for us. And I know we're short on time, but to belabor it a little bit, Harry Brown and others, Senator Pate, I think, was involved in this too, got $1 million appropriated for defense-related activities in the state of North Carolina. The whole concept was, we know there may be another round of BRAC coming up. So what is it the state of North Carolina is doing to be prepared for that? We know about it in our region and communicating, and I think they're getting it in terms of the administration, is understanding the issues that we face, and that is, what are we doing in terms of these away spaces, and how are we going to go about doing that? And how do we make the defense sector relevant to these non-host counties for them to see that there's economic benefit as a result of us supporting the defense industry in eastern North Carolina? What we're working on from our standpoint to really paint a very clear picture of that, it's just like you saw the maps, the cluster maps we developed, is to get essentially that kind of cluster map for the state as a whole and show how that defense dollar travels throughout the state of North Carolina. We're going to be working with the military, what's it called, North Carolina Military Business Center. They've got basically the data. They've just never reflected it in a pictorial way. And for us, that's what we need to do. There's an enormous amount of federal dollars, defense-related dollars, that goes back to the triangle. But I bet you most people in the triangle wouldn't think the defense sector has much impact on them. But they get billions of dollars a year, whether it's in terms of research grants or particular advocacy or studies, or simply the companies they have in their region that support the military or benefit from military procurement. And so that's part of the way I think we can go about getting that message out and doing it. But if you have an opportunity, I know a number of you probably have some pretty good connections back to Raleigh, and I would say it's imperative that you use those and really just continually to reinforce that notion of it's important and we need a point person at Commerce or in this P3 that is attuned to the needs of the military and is acting upon it. I think the MAC, it's called the Military Advisory Council, is going to take on portion of the responsibilities that we've been undertaking through our region, and they say they're going to address those through the MAC, and they're going to use those funds to that benefit. And so I think hopefully we do have representatives at the table. I think you've got somebody from your community that's on the MAC, maybe two people.
Three, Efton Sager, Joe Marham, and Jeremiah Daniels.
Yes. So imperative that we maintain close connections to those folks in terms of feeding them information and getting them what they need to be able to do the job. But you're right, it's absolutely important. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chafee. Thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure.
We appreciate your presentation. Excellent presentation. Any more comments, questions from the
More than
board?
happy to come back anytime.
Thank you so much.
It's always good to be with you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
As you can see, we've running about 20 minutes over our schedule, and we've not finished about 4 of these items. Need to go back and finish these items as quick as we can. Mr. Smith, let's start with the County Management and Tax Administration Records Retention, Disposition Schedule, amendments to number 5, and we'll try to finish all these up before we eat lunch.
Yeah, these are, most of these are kind of housekeeping items. So the first on page 9, County Management Tax Office Record Retention Disposition Schedule Amendments. We have that this is an amendment to that, so we're asking the board to recommend to authorize the chairman of the Wayne County Board of Commissioners to sign the County Management Record Retention Disposition Schedule and amendments. basically allowing the agency policy to destroy in office when the administrative value ends.
What's the pleasure of the board?
Make a motion we accept, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Motion's on the floor to accept the county manager's recommendations on the record retention and disposition schedule and amendments. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed? Thank you. It's unanimous. Number 6, Mr. Smith, approval of high bid previously declared surplus property located, I believe, Ms. Noel Woods.
Noel Woods is going to handle that in about 30 seconds.
Right on time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
She was listening.
Internet's nice, isn't it?
It is.
Yes, it is. Y'all voted way too quickly for me. Good morning.
Good morning.
Or afternoon. Just like I said
Good
last
afternoon.
commissioner meeting, I wanted to be able to come back to you this commissioner meeting. We did have a technicality with one of the properties, but the second bidder did purchase the property for $40,000. So, the following property has been declared surplus by the Wayne County Board of Commissioners, and this property was recently auctioned off on GovDeal's website. We are requesting approval to accept and award the final bid received on this property to the highest bidder.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Daugherty.
I move approval.
Motion's on the floor that we approve recommendation. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed? Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you do
Thank
them
Noel
all?
for the work she's
Can
doing
you
on
do
that,
them all
too.
that way?
We
I'm
wish we
working.
could.
Working on
The
them?
last ones we have are, we're going out to put signs up this week, and hopefully in the next month, all of Wayne County's properties that we own solely will be sold. So then we'll go to the next thing.
That's a great job, thank you.
Thank you.
Question? Maybe this is for Mr. Smith. And how do you incorporate these sales into your budget?
We do not budget for sale of assets until at the time it happens.
Yeah. You
Where-
don't really, you can't really
Because we
anticipate
don't
it.
know ahead of time. You don't know
Understand.
your original
Yeah.
budget.
So
But
it's
you
not
know the
anticipated.
property's coming up for the year. You have an estimate. Do we do this every year?
We really have not been active on sale of property, and since I've been here, we've done some of it. So this is fairly new.
Okay. Where do the funds go once they're sold and the cash is
General
collected?
They go to the general fund.
Okay.
They've not been obligated specifically.
If you would, I'd like to get a number, since we approved the budget, of what we've accumulated thus far. And I'm not going to go as far as to say anticipated sales. Yeah, we'll leave that alone for now. But I'd like to know the budget coming up, and when we start talking about it in May, April, May, it's interesting to see what we can do with some of those funds, because they're not anticipated, they're not budgeted, it's money coming in, undesignated, except general fund.
That's correct.
Okay,
Be glad
I'd like
to,
to
yeah,
like to
make
know
this
those figures.
work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other, let's see, the
So,
2013-14 fire department contracts.
we did, as Brian Taylor, we did
Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
add Pricetown and Pinewood this morning. We had that as he ran in contracts. So good job.
Yes. Good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon.
Before you today is, we're asking for approval of the following fire department contracts: Arrington, Dudley, Fayroe, Grantham, Jordan's Chapel, Nahunta, Polly Watson, Princeton, and Princeton covers the Boone Hill Fire District. Rosewood, Seven Springs, Smith Chapel, Thoroughfare, Pricetown, and Pinewood. And approving these contracts would complete our fire department contracts for this year.
It will complete them? It will complete them
This
all?
will complete all of them for this year. Yes,
Good,
sir.
okay. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the contracts with these remaining fire departments.
Motion's on the floor by Mr. Aycock that we approve these recommendations. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed? Thank you. It's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. North Landing preliminary subdivision plat, Mr. Price?
You've got before you, North Landing preliminary, it's, new subdivision being developed by Northfield Developers in Stony Creek Township off of Church of God Road. Shows lots 6 through 64. You can see it will have one entrance off of Church of God Road, making a circle with all the lots being interior lots. There were previously 5 lots approved along Church of God Road. It borders Beeman's Branch on the south side of the property. Planning board recommends it be approved as presented.
What's the pleasure of the board?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Motion's on the floor that we approve the plat as submitted. Any discussion?
Question.
Mr. Daugherty.
Mr. Price, on these front lots, 1 through 5, were those previously approved?
Yes, sir.
So they already have homes on them?
No, sir.
They don't?
They do not. I think they're probably all for sale, but they do not have any homes on any of the lots. It was just approved a couple of months ago.
Okay, so they got the first section of 5 lots, and then this is the back section?
That's correct, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Acock. Mr. Price, I see on the voluntary ag district, it says parts of lot 60 through 64.
Right.
Is that going to play into it any and all? or-
If you see on the, sort of the bottom right corner of the map, that arc that cuts across there,
Yes, sir.
when they get to a final map, there'll just be a note on the final for that section that'll state that they're in a voluntary ag district.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Acock. Mr. Pate.
I think I've already answered my own question. How far is it off Paytown Road there, 111, when you turn down on the church?
Well, from Sawston Road, it's about 2,700 feet. So if you go from there back out to Paytown Road, maybe another half a mile,
I'm just trying to.
probably about a mile from, probably, if you know exactly where.
I see 111 on your smaller map, that's why I said I think I've answered the
If
question.
you know where Will Sullivan lives, it's next to his house.
Thank
Any other comments? Questions? Mr. Daugherty.
The only other question, have they got any estimate in regards to price range of homes in here? or-
I've not been made aware of any. The ones that are developing this, the homes that they usually build are in the $150,000 to $200,000 range, I guess is what they'll build.
So tricycles? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Price, I guess it's because it's located in the outer horizontal zone surrounding Seymour that we didn't go to Seymour to ask their opinion.
That's
on
correct.
that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, in what circumstances would we ask Seymour's opinion? If
Well,
it
they
was
have,
in-
of course, they were made aware of this. They have a ex officio member of the planning board who sees all of our plats anyway. But if this was in an industrial zone and they were wanting to change it to a residential zone, or if they were in the airport zone and change it to residential, then they would be notified then, as any adjoining property owner would. The base commander would get a certified letter, and they would have the opportunity to come to the public hearing to speak or submit a letter like any other adjoining property owner. In this case, it did not require any kind of rezoning for this project to go through.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, discussions for Mr. Price? Motion's on the floor, we approve. All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed, that is unanimous. Thank you. The last item on new business that we need to bring before you, and as chairman, I apologize, particularly Mr. Acock, that this is the first time this has been seen this morning by the commissioners, but I do feel like it's important enough to at least bring it before the commission. I've talked to Mr. Daugherty, who serves on the hospital board and represents the commission, and he has asked that this be on the agenda this morning. He's gotten with Mr. Parker and Mr. Smith, and they have put this resolution together. Again, I apologize, particularly you, Mr. Aycock, that it is on the agenda for the first time, and we haven't really had a chance to look it over, but I would like to present it, and that's what we've done here. So I'm going to ask, I guess, Mr. Smith, because he and Mr. Daugherty and Mr. Parker have gotten together and taken this resolution from a similar resolution that was put before or put to public from the business sector, from the Chamber of Commerce. So, Mr. Smith, if you'll take it from here.
Yeah, I mean, there are different forms of resolutions that are out there in the community, and this is just, based on what the chamber did, this is one I would say doesn't have as specific of information that were in some of the others that are out there. If you look at the spirit of this, it basically is saying that, and I think this is important, that Blue Cross Blue Shield or any agency or insurance company needs to have a good relationship with the hospital because it is our only hospital. We need a profitable hospital, but for recruiting, for retention, but also for people, retirees that live in the area, we need the hospital and Blue Cross Blue Shield to sit down and look at, we know this is a business decision, but we know we need these two groups to look at it from the perspective of our community. And I think that's the spirit of it, is to ask them to sit down, take a look. It is a business, but, you know, that's mainly what's being asked in the spirit of it. And Borden or anyone else want to add, that's predominantly what, you know, and Mr. Daugherty and I have talked about it. I've talked to Bill Paul, I've talked to Blue Cross, and they've said, if, you know, and talk about the county reacting, and I said, we need you to sit down. We need you to work this out. And I think that's the spirit of this resolution. Some are much longer, much more detailed. And I give some details about the fact that we're a base community and how important that is. Anytime you have a situation like BRAC in the near future, we need this worked out. And I think that's the spirit of it. And I would ask the attorney, Mr. Daugherty, to comment more, but that's the spirit.
Chambers appeared to me to be more directed toward businesses, and this one is more directed toward the entire population, particularly the governmental employees who have Blue Cross and have concerns about where they would go to get their hospitalization if they needed it, as well as what Mr. Smith said about the military and the retirees.
How many people are associated with the county as employees of the county, whether they're retired or working? How many people would you say?
On Blue Cross?
On Blue Cross,
on
yeah.
Blue Cross.
Just from the county?
Somewhere around 700.
Okay. I have got reports from the Board of Education that it's possibly 2,200 people that could be affected in the Board of Education. Okay.
And so between the two, you know, 3,000 or so, you know, between the two. So.
Okay.
And that's not even hitting the other community folks. So it's a big number.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Daugherty.
If I comment on this, in fact, I was notified yesterday that the state health plan that has been exclusive Blue Cross Blue Shield has actually opened up now with some options in going in with Humana. That was interesting. But this resolution basically outlines how important Wayne Memorial is to our community, and that we are urging Blue Cross Blue Shield and the hospital to get back to the table and work their differences out and sign an agreement that both can agree to. And we're getting out of the percentages from one side or the other. We're not putting a dog in that fight. We're just simply saying, get back to the table and negotiate an agreement, because Wayne Memorial Hospital is too important to our community. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Daugherty.
I'll follow up with that with a motion that we approve this resolution as written.
Just before you made your motion, I was going to call
Oh,
Mr.
I'm
Bell.
sorry.
He-
Yeah, I
he
just
had
have
his
a
hand.
question for Mr. Doherty. Has Wayne Hospital stopped taking Blue Cross Blue Shield?
No,
No.
no, they
Well,
still.
the reason
are
I
taking-
asked that, because I took this lady to the doctor yesterday, she had Blue Cross Blue Shield, and the people made her pay for the services.
At Wayne Memorial?
Yeah, Wayne Memorial Facility, the orthopedic clinic over there.
Well, now, is the orthopedic clinic part of the hospital?
Yeah.
It is.
Mhm.
I don't understand why that would be,
I
because
didn't
this
understand either.
contract is not terminated.
5th of December, yeah.
That's correct. So why that would be, everything's supposed to be the same under the existing contract
Yeah.
until that time.
That's what I
So
was thinking.
Doesn't
Thank
make
you.
much sense, does it?
Any other comments? And now, since there are none, Mr. Daugherty, would you please repeat your motion?
Yes. I move that we approve the resolution as written and before us.
Okay, and the motion's on the floor that we approve this resolution as written before us. Any discussion? If I have a piece that I received this a short time ago, and I prepared something here that would like to make known to the public. And because it quotes President Bill Paul, I've written it down to make sure the quotes are correct and give him credit for those quotes. President Bill Paul is right. The hospital and Blue Cross must meet in the middle to avoid disruption for patients. Wayne Memorial is a high-quality hospital that provides an essential service to the people of Wayne County. Quote, last Friday, President Paul made it very clear to me Blue Cross is insisting Wayne Memorial Hospital sign a contract which allows them to make charges unilaterally at any time that gives them complete control financially. If Wayne Memorial signs this contract, this type of contract, the long-term implications could be significant to the hospital as well as local health care. Quote, like President Paul, I'm sure all the commissioners understand that a healthy hospital is a key to a healthy community and wants nothing more than to have a contract with Blue Cross in place so Wayne Memorial can focus on what they do best, caring for their patients. As chairman, I am aware of our current situation with Blue Cross, and I understand Wayne Memorial's position. In times like these, leaders must put aside petty politics and put people first. Reach across the aisle and embrace one another to accomplish what is right and what is best for all the people in Wayne County. Working together in this grassroots effort is paramount and only strengthens our ability to protect the local health care in Wayne County. President Paul has asked us to join them, quote, in the hope that Blue Cross will recognize the valuable role Wayne Memorial Hospital plays within the local healthcare landscape and make a sincere effort to reach a mutually beneficial contract for both parties. Therefore, I wish to amend this resolution that this be establishing a joint resolution, which includes all municipalities of Wayne County, including the Board of Education, and request all boards to act on their next respective board meetings on or before November the 4th, and schedule this board's favorable consideration on November the 5th. That's my motion to amend the original motion. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Daugherty.
if I might, I would just simply add your amendment to my original motion, if that'd be okay.
It'd be fine. Okay. Mr. Parker.
appears to me what you said as an amendment would be a motion to table to allow these other municipalities and Board of Education to consider and join.
That's part of the amendment, is that they act at their respective board meetings on or before November the 4th and schedule this board's favorable consideration on November the 5th to support the resolution.
Which would not be voting on the actual resolution that Commissioner Daughtry has introduced.
Okay, so
If I understood.
if we could just vote on the amendment and...
I didn't quite understand it that way. I'm sorry. I thought we were simply just asking the respective boards here in Wayne County to, at their next scheduled meeting, to approve a resolution similar to this, if not this resolution. Is that not it?
I think the main emphasis here, Mr. Parker, is to create this as a joint resolution that we all are on the same page. So if I need to reword my amendment to indicate that it be a joint resolution where we move forward as a whole instead of alone.
And based on what you're saying, then, you don't want the board to vote on the actual resolution today until you hear back from the municipalities and the Board of Education?
Yes, sir, and we do it jointly.
That would appear to me to be a motion to table under those specific conditions to bring it back on November the 4th.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bell.
My honest opinion, I think a joint resolution would garner more power from between the two, the Wayne Hospital and Blue Cross and Blue Shield, because when they see all these people are signing, you supporting your resolution, which is stated good, but when all these people get together, I believe it will have more power. That's just my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Any other comments? Mr. Pate?
This is truly important. And I'm a retired state employee, so it affects me directly. And if we push this on out, and I think the collective impact of everybody voting together is a good thing. But I say, and I hesitate to use this, but I'm going to say it that way. November 5th should be the last date. If the other partners in this have not done theirs yet, we still need to go forward.
Yes, sir.
We can't wait any longer after that date.
Okay. Mr. Aycock?
Do we have any figures on percentage-wise, how many, 70, 80, 85% of the citizens of Wayne County will be affected by, do we have any ballpark? It's got to be great, though.
I couldn't even tell you the number. I mean, because you've got a lot of private entities out there, a lot of people who buy through independent agents that buy, Blue Cross. I just have no idea.
If I could
I think that, just to respond to Mr. Aycock's comment, is that I wrote down, thinking of the same as how much it is in the county. Mr. Chafee quoted, "Deals are made when counties are in concert with the state." In this case, we have promised the last seven municipalities in September, all seven, that we would include them moving forward on issues such as this and anything that concerned the majority or the whole of the county. And that's what this, I guess, amendment alludes to, is that if we could somehow indicate that we would be, I think, quoting again, we have a better chance of cutting a deal with Blue Cross if we move forward collectively, as Mr. Bell has alluded to. Mr. Daughtry, you had a comment.
I have no issue with that. I just simply would be concerned that those boards that bring up this resolution may want to modify it in some way. I just hope that we don't get into a problem in regards to putting words in the mouth of other boards. I don't want them to take any offense to us actually submitting a resolution drawn up by this board and stating, this is our resolution and we are asking you to support this resolution. But I have no problem, I agree wholeheartedly with my fellow commissioner that jointly would be the better way of going. But on November the 4th, at our next meeting, if in fact we do not have
On the 5th.
those on board, I would then hope that this board would take action.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daugherty. Mr. Mayo.
The resolution, the way it is like we did in the past, is that there would be this same resolution would be sent to all municipalities, including the Board of Education.
Sure.
And all they have to do is to fill in their information as to who's going to sign it. That's what we did for the Aycock birthplace. So what I would recommend is that immediately that all municipalities and the Board of Education, or send them an email, whatever we need to do to get this in their hands, and to get it back as soon as possible. And on the deadline, if they have a problem, Mr. Daugherty, with the way this is worded, or they do not want to support it, they just don't have to act. They don't have to put it on their agenda, as far as the municipality. If we don't get it back in the time necessary that we've established, then we move on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayo.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Cromartie.
first I'd like to congratulate you on being inclusive with the municipalities and all those that you said. I probably a well-written cover that goes with it to explain that we are not trying to tell you what to do, but we're inviting you to be on the same page with us and join together with I believe that would make it acceptable for all those entities out there. And thank you, Mr. Bell and Cheryl, for your broad insight on that.
Thank you, Mr. Cromartie. Any other discussions? We're going to vote on the amendment.
I think it's really a motion to table based on what you've said.
All right. We'll just, I'll pull that amendment then, and just based on what the discussions have been, move that we table this until the 5th of November. On conditions that
Sent to the municipalities and the Board of Education.
yes, that our desire is to form a joint resolution. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the amendment, raise your hand. Or the motion to table, raise your hand. Mr. Baker?
Yeah, I did.
All those opposed? Thank you. That's unanimous. Okay, we've gotten everything out of the way. These gentlemen are here for the 1 o'clock meeting. I would like to have a motion that we go into recess and that we eat lunch, which is prepared for us, and come back within the next 20 minutes. And it'll be about 5 after 1 to get started. Do I have a motion that we go into recess? Okay, Mr. Aycock made the motion. We go into recess. All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed, thank you. Wait till this is